Park area once. I took the St. John's Bridge. I walked up the hill and then right near the bridge, and the sign was like, cyclists, don't ride on the sidewalk. Alright, so I rode on the bridge, and apparently none of my friends appreciated that.
So I'm running one of the program.
So if I ever do it again, I'll just break the rules and that's cognizant of pedestrians.
Did you go there?
So I took the other route.
That's already gone this way. Okay.
There's a bunch of my
How is this?
No, I haven't.
Your undergrad?
Something like that. I took some odd random roads because I got lost several times. I'm not very social. I want to go up there again because I think the kids would love super cool. Bring like a frisbee and a ball. So, just take the bus over something.
Great. Welcome to the Portland Traffic and Transportation course. And this edition is a new evolution of the course. So I'm just going to welcome you. I'm not actually part of the course, but I am the director of the School of Urban Studies and Planning over at PSU, where we are. And we are co-running the course with the City of Portland. Some of you in this room are actually registered as PSU students. And most of you aren't. You're just community members who want to learn more about transportation, which is awesome. I'm a transportation planner, so I'm pretty excited about this. So the new evolution, the city has decided to hire someone to actually bring a new perspective to the course. And I'm going to let her tell you all about this new configuration. But I don't know if a lot of you knew, but there's a long wait list for this course. It's become very popular. So you're lucky to be in the course. Some of you were maybe waitlisted from last year, I think Sarah was saying. And so I'm glad you could make it. And welcome to PSU. And so Tui Tu is the consultant and transportation planner who has been hired to run the course this term. I'll just let you take it up.
I'll let you hand it over to
Oh, right.
Sarah and Michael.
Sarah and Michael, sorry. It's been a long day. Sarah and Michael from PBOT.
Portland Bureau of Transportation, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having
So
us.
if you want to
Definitely. So yeah, we just wanted to welcome everybody to the class. 2019 marks the 28th year that the Portland Bureau of Transportation has offered this class to the public. And this is the first year that it is now branded as Portland Traffic and Transportation, the New Evolution, with Tui as our lead facilitator. And we're really excited to have a vision for this class that really aligns with PBOT's goals and values and commitment to advancing equity. And we couldn't be more pleased to have Tui filling this role. So we're very excited to be here.
Yeah, and hi, my name is Michael Espinoza, and it was really exciting to see so much interest. I got to read your applications, and there's a lot of demand for this course, and so we see that a lot of Portlanders are interested in what's happening in the transportation world, and so we're excited that you get to be here, and welcome to folks who are joining online as well. We're streaming it live through Zoom webinars, so folks can follow along online, or if for some reason you're not able to be here in person, you're welcome to do that as well. And then we'll have a video recording captured and available on the PBOT YouTube account. So it'll live on there if you wanted to go back to something and review something.
Yeah, so stay tuned. And so without further ado, let's welcome Tui Tu.
Thank you. Hi. Before I talk about myself or introduce myself, I'd like to introduce Sarah. You have to say it.
Bermudez.
So Sarah, she's a graduate assistant who will be helping me collating, planning the course, getting things in order, wrote up all the great words up there that we're going to be focusing on during this whole session. So welcome again. Welcome, Sarah. Welcome, everybody. Like I said, Tui Tu with Tui Tu Consulting. I'm a professor and I also consult on traffic and transportation across the city and the region. I teach in several universities. This is the first time at PSU. I've taught in the U of O Architecture School on Master Planning for Resiliency. I've taught at the University of Portland Engineering School, also planning for the next big earthquake and what we're going to do for engineering students. So this is a good return back to the public side and working with PBOT and bringing my work and transportation into the whole mix. Before I start, I'd like to take a poll of who are the students.
If you signed up like directly with
Yes,
PSU
With,
versus the PBOT program.
okay, so there's 1, 2, 3.
You signed up with me.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
through PBOT.
okay.
What I want to do is do a round of introductions with everybody. Most people know, I can share more about my background, but really class is about you, it's for you. It's been a legacy class for 29 years, and it's been taught by my friends, Rick Gustafson and his daughter, Julie. The legacy continues. I'm not changing so much of the course, but a lot of it has evolved over time, but in terms of the projects, I want to keep it essentially the same. Rick will be involved at some point. I've also invited Earl Blumenauer to be involved with the class. I'm having coffee with him tomorrow to see how his vision for the class evolved over the last few decades as he's working everything around the state and locally here. So let's do rounds of introductions. Give me your name, who you're with, and how did you get here? Versus also, what would be the most interesting way to get to a class like this? Like, did you come here through a submarine of some sort? Or what would you envision that you would be really cool to get here? So let's just start flowing through.
Hi, I'm Kate. I'm the Communications Director for the Transportation Research Center here at PSU. And then how did I get here? Well, I biked over here one-handed holding my dress because I forgot I was wearing it. I'm just trying to get over to the building, figure out where this building was. First time here.
Yeah, cool. Welcome.
And I'm Alex. I live in Portland, and I'm a pediatrician who actually works out in Gresham. So I have a pretty long commute from work to here.
Oh, welcome.
So I guess ideally it's not anything super creative, but it would be great to just be able to maybe hop on the Max or bus and directly make it over here.
My name is Bob. I'm a teacher with PBS, teach social studies, also kind of a transportation enthusiast, I guess, very interested in public transportation. And I guess it would be cool to take like a boat here, a taxi boat.
That might happen at some point.
Are you at Lincoln or Benson? Which school are you at PPS?
I'm a substitute this year. Yeah.
Hi everybody, I'm Caroline. I use they, them pronouns. I teach bicycle safety education at the Community Cycling Center. So if you see me with 12 kids, that's probably me. But like they all have like mohawks and unicorns, which is super fun. I also run the women's bike program at the Street Trust. And if I could pick a way to go here, I would ride a dragon here. I think that would be pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Like everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we got boat, dragon. Yeah. Various others.
Veronica, I'm civil engineer with WSP. Took the bus here, and I like the bus system. Pretty nice. So.
Okay. If you were not catching the bus here, how would you want to travel here?
I mean, teleporting would be ideal, but you know, I feel like that's a ways away.
My name's Millie, and I work for Bonneville Power on the Columbia River Treaty, and I'm also the one of the sort of volunteer bike ambassadors for Bonneville employees. help kind of make bike commuting easier. I got here by bus today, but I'll probably bike in the future. And I don't see why there's another way that would be better than that.
Is there a date certain for Luminara coming?
I don't know yet. I will meet with him tomorrow, so I'll find out. But I'm not sure.
There's a group at PSU that's trying to get Luminara to come for a different. My name's Lou, LEW, Transit Riders Union. I walked.
I'm Paulina. This morning I biked to PSU campus, but then I walked over to this building. And I really like my biking service in general. Maybe like a magic carpet would be interesting to try, but in general, it's different bikes.
I'm not.
I'm Andrew. I'm a software developer and a dad with 2 little kids. So that's sort of why I'm interested in this. I took the streetcar today, but normally I ride my bike everywhere. It's just what happened. So I guess the creative way to get here would be I would drastically change our transportation system. I would actually gut the streetcar. I would make bus rapid transit everywhere, but they would basically be streetcars that aren't tracked. And I think it would solve 90% of the problem. Not like I'm opinionated or anything.
No one here is opinionated.
Sorry, I forgot to add that I'm a civil engineering student at Portland State, but I'm not. I didn't know that you can actually take this class as a part of your course load.
You can.
I didn't know, so I just took it through FIBA, but I am interested in doing transportation. I've been interning in transportation field for the past year and a half, and that's what I'm gonna do.
You're at McKenzie.
I was in McKinsey. I was in Kittleson this past summer.
Oh, okay. So, okay, you're deep in topic. Okay.
My name is Lowe's. I'm an undergrad here at PSU and studying community development. And I try to choose all electives based on transportation. And in transportation in the field of continue studying and working.
My name's Andrew. I'm also an undergrad community development major. I got here by bus, but I live on the other side of the West Hills. It'd be pretty cool if I could just zip line down from the top.
My name's Nathan. I'm not a student here, just kind of a transit geek in my spare time, I guess. I got here by taking the bus. I live in North Portland. I think I, ideally would have ridden my bike, maybe with some physically protected bike lane. But for me, riding the bike's the ideal way to get around.
I'm Paul. I teach driver's ed at PCC, and I'm a longtime transit geek as well. I live southeast, 45th and Clinton, and I'm in the Richmond Neighborhood Association. And I took the number 2 bus, get down here, and it worked fine.
I'm Sam Balto. I'm a phys ed teacher at Cesar Chavez School in North Portland. He teaches my students how to ride bikes. I rode my bike here, but I think it'd be pretty cool to be able to ice skate here. It'd be fun.
I'm David Binnig. I'm a bartender. I got here by bus. I have actually ice skated Portland streets once when we had a sufficient ice storm. Ice skating on hills is tough, it turns out, but it can be done.
I'm Rob Mumford. I'm a graphic designer, and I rode my bike here today. I am a dad, and I have a daughter that I take to school on bike. So you said this is how we would get.
How did you get here? And in a perfect world, how would you want to get here?
Right.
What would have been like any world that you exist in?
I took my daughter to OHSU for nothing big, but I really enjoyed the tram.
Yeah.
It's not plausible, but I trams everywhere.
So zip line and tram is kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Paulina Salgado, and I work with TriMet. I am currently working on the Division Transit project. I got here by driving because I was out in outer division. So in order to make it on time, I had to drive. But ideally, I would probably take the MAX because it's very convenient from my house to here.
Hey, I'm Paul Haney. I'm an orientation and mobility instructor. That means I teach school-age children who are blind how to get around. So a lot of my job is teaching them how to utilize transit and get around safely. And I got here by biking, but I think ideally I would want to walk everywhere. I think that's probably the most inclusive way to get around, and that's how I teach my students how to get around. So.
Hi, Terry. Nice to meet you. My name is Juana. I work with APANO, the Asian Pacific American Network. Recently, I work with the one AA program with AARP grant and about the transportation in J District. So we got a lot of opportunity in transportation. So kind of interesting to take a class. And I drove here today and pay $5 for the parking. So next week I will take a MAX or bus.
Which might still cost you $5.
I'm Andy, he, him. I took I'm an event producer. I took the 19 here from my office, although I live in Starwood, so I ride the 70 every day.
Yep.
In a perfect world, how would I get here? I think with the news that Cardigo is leaving the city, I think a nice dream would be that the city maybe replaces it with some kind of PBOT owned and operated like public municipal ride, like car sharing scheme. We're talking, I think might be more unrealistic than the Dragon though.
So Bike Town, but with cars.
Something like that.
I'm Irene Marion. I'm speaking to you shortly, so I won't say too much, but I work for the Portland Bureau of Transportation. And I guess I should say how I get around. So I live in East Portland. I work downtown, but my kids both are in daycare in the Collie and Concordia neighborhoods. I do a lot more driving than I would like. I'm switching off with my husband. I do take the MAX downtown. I drove today.
I'm a victim of that too. I drive into town because I live so far out. I live like out in east on the up of Outview, so my commute is really long and it's usually all day. But I park at one place and I walk everywhere, so I'm very sustainable. And then I drive home. But yes.
My name's Eric Mitchell. I'm actually one of the guys that drives your TriMet bus.
Oh, you're a TriMet driver?
I am.
Awesome.
2 years now.
Okay.
I took the Max Green Line down here, actually from 5 blocks to my house to what it's 3 blocks down there. So I'm kind of lucky in that I live at the 60th stop, so it's nice and easy for me to get about anywhere on TriMet. Interesting way that we could get here. I recently went to Vancouver and their automated sky trains are amazing. I would love it if TriMet had the money and wherewithal to scrap our light rail and replace it. Sorry, union guys. But the fact that you can get around Vancouver with a train that literally comes every 2 to 4 minutes and you don't even have to schedule it. You just walk up there and shows up right after the last one's walking with them.
I heard the theme of Sky coming out quite a bit. I haven't heard Tunnel yet.
You should certainly do a tunnel under Portland with the SkyTrain.
A little bit more appealing. Yeah.
Yes, Andrew Campbell, Active Transportation Program Specialist for Montgomery County. Pronouns he, him, his, or Andrew. I got here by driving. I am one of the individuals that drive quite often. In addition to, if ideal world, if I didn't want to drive, I probably would like to commute through a helicopter. So, thanks.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I am a grant writer for PCC, and I'm a member of Oregon and Southwest Washington Families for Safe Streets. We are a group of activists who have lost family members in car accidents, and so I drove here, and I paid $8 to park, so I need to find that $5.
After 5 p.m.
Oh, okay.
$5 as the option.
And I think ideally, if like the weather was good and we had protected bike lanes that were well lit and I felt safe, I would ride my bike everywhere.
I'm Jessie Marin. I'm actually an alumnus of this class. And my project was about how the class could be improved and diversified. And so I am here today, and I'm hoping to sit in on all the classes to see this new evolution. I primarily bus and bike, but definitely walking is my preferred mode.
And is the class diversified compared to the one you went to before?
Yes, in terms of students, we'll see. In terms of content, I'm excited about that too.
Just was invited me to come.
I got very lost. That's what I'm up to. My name's Stephanie Lonsdale. I am finishing my master's in urban planning here at PSU. This is my last credit, so I'm so happy to be here with you guys. I work for the Bureau of Transportation for now, for the next few months, doing like policy innovation and some pilot programs in the city. What's the other problem? I took the MAX for my morning commute, but then I walked around downtown to get here. I guess ideally I would bike, but I don't have a bike right now. So soon though, the rain will not scare me away.
I was just gonna text you and let you know what room number we're in. We have one more.
Hi, my name is Tristan Isaac. I use he, they pronouns. I'm a community organizer with a nonprofit called Green Lens. I also serve on the board of another nonprofit called Opal Environmental Justice. And I'm also on the steering committee of Bus Riders Union, Organized Riders Union, whose members I represent on TriMet's Transit Equity Advisory Committee.
We should have you up here talking. We should actually have all you guys up here talking transportation. I think we will. Another person that just entered the room is Michelle DePaz, and she is also an alumni. So we're just doing simple introductions, and then how you got here, how you found the room. And in an ideal world, Michelle, how would you want to come here? In any sphere of like dragon, we've got like dragon and zip lining and like magic carpet and all these things. So,
so my name is Michelle. I use she and her pronouns. I work for the city of Portland. I'm also on the Portland School Board. That's a new job for me. It's volunteer. It's really stressful, but I love it. It's like the worst political job you could have in Oregon or in Portland, let's say. I wouldn't have driven here for sure, but I did. I would, let's say, yeah, I would totally zip line and then take a scooter for the last mile, maybe. I don't know. Alternative. I love the idea of roller skating, so I feel really lucky to have maybe not the zip lining, but lots of choices in how I get places.
okay, cool. I'm gonna swing through here really quickly because we also have two presentations. But I want to go over a few things on the syllabus. This class, probably the first time there's more to the syllabus and the outline than before, because I do teach in other universities and we do have students and that are taking for credit. So just to let you know.
after like.
You mentioned it used to be Rick Gustafson's class.
sorry?
Is there a date certain when Rick Gustafson is going to come and talk?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
So with the new evolution, initially we're gonna look at traveling through time. We're gonna look at not just how we got here, but really the system that had been built from bugs and bunnies to where things have happened in the past within our indigenous communities and our system, in our current system, and then planning for our future. And there's a big piece in urban planning that's also really important that is more integrated now with housing and land use and transportation. So we're going to touch on those aspects as well. So this is the first week we're here, the introduction to PSU and with PBOT. And we have guests Michelle DePass and Irene who's going to speak in a minute. But I want to go through the course structure. So the structure, as the syllabus says, is broken into 3 phases. The first phase is the history of our transportation system. The second is where we are currently. The third is how we're planning for our future. And the 5 main themes that will come out from the course, as you can see on display and also up against the wall, is equity, diversity, and inclusion, livability and affordability, community engagement, it's a very important aspect, sustainability and resiliency, and then lastly, but not least, really is smart cities and planning for our future with innovation and technology. So the questions I have up there have been pretty successful in a couple of my other courses. And if you take a moment to read through your syllabus and also the questions, I have put sticky notes at the table. So when our guest speakers come in and there's a thought that prompts you to think about, like, how do we really travel, but how do we really plan, how do we implement, and how do we take this from the planning and the policy, design, engineering, and implementation, but also including those questions of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I'm going to have probably, does anybody read off the first question, equity?
I'd read it.
Okay.
How can we equitably distribute resources so everyone has what they need, recognizing historical and present disparities?
So, second one. Anyone else? Yeah.
Diversity. Who is
also in your syllabus if you don't want
Oh,
to
it's
strain your
okay.
eyes. Okay.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Thanks. Who is affected by our decisions, and especially who might be disproportionately harmed by our solutions?
And the last one. Anybody? Okay.
How can we include disproportionate harm people into the process early and often as possible?
Okay. Did you have a question?
No, I was volunteering.
Okay, you can read the next slide actually, if you like. So woven throughout the course, there's sustainability, climate change, community, cross connection within interdisciplinary, which is very important. Integration within disciplinary is very important. Cultural landscape and diversity, our commitment to ethics, and also social justice and equity. Anybody have any questions regarding what we're headed into? We're gonna spend some time together. It's 2 hours on a Thursday night in the winter. You're gonna like this stuff because you're doing this voluntarily. So here again are the questions. So I think it's really important to emphasize these questions when the guest speakers come in because this is how we learn. In terms of class project, so previously Rick had always had an individual project. I didn't want to change that so much. I'll talk more about the project, but within the outline, it has always been, how do we influence change? How do you influence change within the city? What can you take from this course? What can you learn from the professionals and those who work in agencies, and take that back to yourself, to your community, and then how do you advocate for certain types of transportation systems that not just influences you or your child, but also your whole community. So I'm going to talk more about the project, but this is essentially the background of the exploration and the planning for the project. We'll look at existing conditions. So essentially what it is identifying what it is that you want to change. If it's how you travel, is it the bus, is it certain things? And then describe your transportation problem. And from there, identify different solutions that you can see that could get to that piece. Head out into the community and talk to folks who can help you implement kind of that change and some solutions. And then essentially we'll come back as a group at the end and do class presentation. So I have a civil engineering background, and my work has been primarily infrastructure for a good chunk of my career until now. I've done a lot more community-based planning and integrating that with transportation. So I did kind of word for thought as to what infrastructure means to me. And I think this is kind of a cool thing where you can look and see, like, what does infrastructure mean to you? How do you travel? Why are you here? How do you get around? How do you plan for the future? So food for thought. One of the few things from a couple of my previous classes was, as we look at the new evolution, we're retooling how our mindset and how we make change. And how do we retool, like, land use? Is it policies? Land use and planning, and then urban planning. And how do you plan for that new evolution and resilience? So here are some characteristics and qualities. They're not repeats, but they're just like really embedded into like how we structure our world. I'm not going to read them. You can read them, but we are going to move forward, I think. So some recommended readings. One of the things I be remiss to mention is that we're going to do a class photo at one point just to commemorate this inauguration of the new evolution. So let me know if you want to be out of the photo. But we're going to probably do it at break at some point today or tonight. Okay. I think, Michelle, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay. Thank you.
So Michelle's also an alumni of the course.
Yeah, actually, I took this course last year. It was, and I'll talk about that a little bit, but I'm sorry I missed the introductions because it would have been nice to just hear everybody's name and hear why you're here. I'll tell you why I'm here. I'm here because I'm an alum of the class, and I took the class, and on the very first night of class, I came in about 5 minutes late. So I'm in the back of the class. I usually like to sit up front. And let me back up a little bit.
Yeah, of course. You have the floor.
Oh, yes? Yes. Okay. So my background, I'm a PSU graduate in the School of, my bachelor's degree is in community development from the School of Planning. I then went on and got sustainable MBA, a green MBA on a little island up in the woods in the Puget Sound. It was an amazing program. It was about 25% in residence on that island, and then 75% online. But I have an activist background growing up. My family was in the Black Panthers. I'm born and raised in Portland, Oregon. I also lived in Caracas, in Guadalajara, Washington, D.C., and Los Angeles. So I feel like a real broad, understanding. I've lived in bigger cities, and, anyway, that's me. I took this class last year. I was really interested in transportation because I volunteered on the Williams Avenue bike lane project. I don't know if any of you remember that. That was a project that was supposed to be like 6 months, striping project, easy, one and done. Gather a group of, community people together to advise the PBOT, the Portland Bureau of Transportation, and it was going to be striped and done. Well, some of us in the community understood that those stripes were representative of like increased gentrification, you know, more businesses coming that maybe weren't wanted, less Black people, more white people. You know, that's not a bad thing in itself, but it's the displacement that happens with that kind of trajectory. And anyway, that project ended up being about 4.5 years. A few of us neighborhood residents, so I was born in the neighborhood I live in, right off of Williams, and everything important in my life happened within a block of Williams. So my dad emigrated from Panama. I had my first job at the Black Panther Free Health Clinic when I was 12. I took blood pressure readings and drew blood. My parents met on Williams Avenue the first day my dad was in this country. My grandparents lived, you know, and I currently live and raising my kids within a couple blocks of Williams. So Williams Avenue was really important to me. I volunteered on that advisory committee for about 4.5 years. The advisory committee started out small with a small group of stakeholders and was expanded to include more people of color on that, more Black people in particular from the neighborhood. I was part of that second iteration of stakeholders that was there to advise PBOT on the project. So the project ended up, PBOT ran out of money because it was not supposed to be a 4.5-year project, but because of some of the elements that the community brought in, such as advocating for a history project on that street. We went through, once the project was decided, we went through RFP process to solicit artists to come in and do markers. You know, we had a selection of different types of art, public art. We ended up going with a neighborhood couple that are both artists, that are public artists, that have history in the neighborhood, and they ended up doing floor tiles embedded in the furniture zone. I don't know what that's called. The furnishing zone.
The right of way.
The right of way, where the poles and stop signs go, and also doing poles that had markers on them up and down a 1.9-mile stretch of Williams Avenue between Broadway and Killingsworth. So that project, if you're walking, it's a great project because it's kind of walkable scale. You can't really see the art while you're driving, but if you're walking, you can see that. So I was one of the people, several people advocated for doing something besides just doing bike lanes to acknowledge that Black people actually lived in the neighborhood, had lives, had businesses, had homes, had institutions, and we didn't want to lose that. So this class comes, first night, I'm all excited, I'm a little bit late, 5 minutes late, I like to be early, but I'm sitting in the back and I'm hearing this lecture talk about like the history of transportation, which you're going to cover, and where roads happen, and that a couple things I heard that were a little bit disturbing to me were that along the banks of the river, the Native Americans were paid, maybe not, for the land along the Willamette, and I was like, no, they weren't paid because they were actually consolidated. The tribes were consolidated and they were marched to the beach. There was no compensation for that. Then a second fact came out in the history, and it was like, you know, if you were a married couple, you were given 360 acres of land in the West Hills, and you could develop your land over time, over generations. You could parcel it off. You know, Skyline happened, Germantown Road, and some of those places. And I was like, well, yeah, if you were married, if you were white, you were straight, like you were, you know, a male and a female that was white and married, you know, so there were things that were in that lecture that I heard that were true, and yet they weren't true enough. According to what we know now. So we know now that the Indians were not paid for the land. We know now that, you know, yes, you could be married and get land, but you had to be straight and married. And so I was, at the end of the class, I gave my feedback and I said, knowing what we know now about our state history, we know better and we need to teach better. And I said that, I stood up in the back of the class, and not one person in that class, I'm thinking I'm here in a classroom with people that are like me because we're all interested in transportation. Not one person said anything, and I was like, okay, biker dudes. So I let it go, and I thought, you know, I'm going to be open-minded, and of course, a few weeks later, we had off the record, we went out for a class, little afternoon, you know, after class gathering, we'll call it. You know, we're all toasting each other, and I was like, hey dudes, you know, nobody said anything that night. Like, where were you? I'm sitting here, I'm the only Black woman in the room, And nobody said anything. Like, I felt really alone, and I felt like you guys could have said something, like maybe you could have coughed or something, acknowledged what I said. And they were like, oh gosh, I didn't know what to say, and I kind of felt awkward, and I was like, okay, we need classes right now today on how to interrupt. If you hear something that sounds a little funny, you need to develop your skills to interrupt that. So that's partly why I'm here today, is because I'm so thrilled. I gave feedback to Irene, I gave feedback to the person that coordinates this class, to the instructor, and to the director of the Transportation Bureau, saying, we know better now. We know better. We need to teach history as representative of everybody that's in the room. We need to, my history wasn't acknowledged in that first class. And so they must have agreed, and I don't know. Anyway, here's Twee now. Oh, and the other thing was the classes, trying to really diversify the classes too, I thought would be a cool thing. So anyway, I think that's happened. I mean, I'm looking at the class, it looks like a really diverse group of people and interests and backgrounds, and it's really that is so heartwarming for me to see that, we're talking about how to create change in this class somewhat. And this is the class, well, the classroom's a lot nicer too. But just we have a different teacher. We have someone from Peabody that's going to speak to us. We have this diversity experience and where we're all coming from. We're not all similarly situated, and it is awesome woman teaching the class. Thank you. Yeah, and a woman of color. So anyway, thank you for letting me have this time. And I hope I can come back and take the class over the term if I can.
Yes, I think you can. You might have to get on the waiting list.
Oh,
no,
is there a waiting list?
There's a huge waiting list. You guys are very lucky, I have to say. This is the very first time in a university setting or in my setting as a teacher that I get to handpick my students.
Wow.
And all for Peabody. Peabody gave me that opportunity to get handpick my students. It's never been done before. We were very methodical. We could talk about our methodology, but we were very methodical in our questionnaires, in the application. We had a waiting list that's bigger than the class. And I can't discount the legacy of Rick, because he's been amazing to lead this class through to where it is now. So that's very important. But there were 68, 70 people that registered for this term. That's just Peabody, not the PSU that I didn't know about later. I originally capped the class at 30. And I said, I'm not going to teach more than 30. Because the other courses, they've had assistants and others. Thank you, Sarah, for being here. But this is probably my biggest class, because usually I teach smaller courses like design studios and courses that are only in the teens or 20s.
Oh, wow.
I capped it, but I would never turn away students. So then I said, okay, I will do 36, because 6 students register from PSU. Yeah, the waiting list has been astronomically long from this. And the methodology that we use to ask those specific questions of class, race, gender, we have to be open about all this, because this is the new wave of the world that we live in. But I can't discount, I keep going back, I can't discount the work that's been done by everybody else in the world, by the white males that have built this whole city too. So
yeah,
that's really important.
Yes.
I'm friends, I work with a lot of them, so I think it's really important. But what we're seeing now is really you guys here, Michelle kind of bridging that gap from where her experience from the previous class. I took this class myself back in 2015 when I was on a break. I'll make that public. I was on a break. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my career. I have an engineering background, a transportation background, and an architecture background, but I took a break and I said, took this class and became Rick and Julie, and I launched my firm. Yeah. 5 years later, I'm here.
I should say that the class was excellent. We had, Congressman Earl Blumenauer, who is now a friend of mine. We've got, we had the former mayor of Vancouver, not Washington, but Canada, come in. The class was great. No complaints about it, and deep gratitude to Rick and Julie. I mean, I consider them friends as well. Mm-hmm. It's just that I felt like Twee needed to be here. I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much for having me.
So Michelle, when you first took that first class last time, was Rick Gustafson the teacher for that lecture?
He was, I believe, I think it was kind of Sure. I don't remember. lots happened since then, but I think he was one of the presenters and there were others kind of in the room.
Because it sounded like you had a pretty specific critique that nobody supported.
Well, I think the people in the room that didn't say anything didn't know how to be supportive. So, you know, there's all this history of Oregon, you know, that's come out the last several years. And so my feedback was like to incorporate what we know now, because history, you know, it's not that history changes, it's like who's telling the history and who's impacted by the telling that history.
And I want to say I'm really glad that you raised that, because we all have blind spots. So
Sure.
to get another perspective is critical. So thank you for being a part of the change.
Thank you. And I hope that you all have an opportunity to, you know, go out there and make some change.
So in terms of who got into the class, the information I saw online was it was a lottery at random, but it sounds like you handpicked each person.
Yes.
Okay, so apparently that was incorrect information online, that it was just a lottery and random.
But we did do a lottery. We did a selection and a lottery.
So it's a hybrid.
And you won.
And you won.
Yes.
Yes,
We're
so your
volunteering
input
everybody in
matters.
the room.
Everybody's input matters. Thank you, Michelle. Do you guys want to take a little bit of a break and do a photo right now as we load this up? Yeah? Okay.
This photo will be for the PBOT website and a little blog post that's being put together. So I think everybody
Can I borrow your camera?
outside of the room. And if you don't want to be in it, you don't have to be, but
You can come stand with me.
now that we have, PBOT has a social media platform, we're able to put up just interesting content. There are people who are watching remotely and not participating actively in the classroom, but they're still getting the benefit of the class. And so this is just another way to keep them engaged. And then we encourage all of you to follow along. So we will obviously put that information out. So if we can just get everybody on one half of the room, and then I'll take a photo. We can, sitting or standing, I guess I can go sort of like this. Yeah, people kind of squeeze in a little bit. the front there. That would be great.
I'm just staying here.
Yeah, you should stay there. We can pretend to, I can like fly across the table.
Yeah, I'm on the other side.
Want to get in it? Hey, Tweet.
Okay,
I thought you would too.
You can sit on too.
You guys want to come in?
Oh, no. Yeah, if you kneel in front of me, that'd be great. Thanks, everybody. It's like a family photo here. All right, ready? Excellent. And then maybe we get one where people have like their hands in the air and look like that's the best time of their lives. Woo! There we go. Yay. Okay, thank you.
You guys want to come in for a photo?
I can take a photo.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Yeah, if you go in that corner, I think that was sort of a good, I'm kind of a good angle, height challenged. We can pretend we're having fun.
Yeah.
Actually, if you could scoot just like real quick, like right here. Yeah.
Bring it in, team. Bring it
in. Everybody look at the camera. Ooh, okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Somebody blinked. Oh, inevitably.
Yeah.
I'm going right now. It already started. Do you mind if I take my seat? No, go ahead. Yeah.
So next up, we're really honored to have Irene Marion here. doing some great stuff at PBOS and all of that. Over to her. And her initiatives.
Well, welcome to this class, everyone. It's my first time being in this space, but glad to be here. As introduced, my name is Irene Marion. I'm the Equity and Inclusion Manager at Portland Bureau of Transportation. I wanted to provide some information about who PBOT is and what we're doing, but also what my work is focused within that. And I do have some questions that I want to ask you all on as well, since we are in a special setting. So if things kind of come up for you, or if there are things that you're curious about and want to know more about, feel free to raise your hand. So I was raised here in Portland, and I was actually born in a tiny country in the Caribbean, but when we came to Portland, we moved into Selwood because it was a pretty undeveloped place at the time in the early 80s. And I think like most folks in the world, probably, we just got around the city. We got a car in our household, so we got around in the car a lot. We rode our bikes, but mostly for recreation and not for like a transportation need. We definitely walked a lot. When I moved back to the Caribbean, I think that was a part of my life where I probably walked the most because the household I lived in did not have a car. There was not a lot of really developed infrastructure, but you had to get where you had to get and you go where you had to go. And I think transportation really did not become a topic policy-wise that I paid attention to until my early 20s when I was into my career. So I had been an activist here at Portland. I actually started my schooling here at Portland State University as far as my collegiate experience, but I transferred and went to Howard University, which is an HBCU, a historically Black college in Washington, D.C. When I graduated, I worked for a number of national nonprofit organizations, and the last job I had was on Capitol Hill at the Congressional Black Caucus. And what stood out to me, a lot of things happened during my time on Capitol Hill, including working under the Bush administration for his last 2 years and then under the Obama administration for his first 2 years. But especially as President Obama came in, there was a huge shift at the federal level around the diversification of folks that were involved in everything related to green. So green jobs, sustainability, like all the things. And because I worked for the Black Caucus and because that diversification was happening, it became a moment when we could engage our caucus members and at a legislative topic that they had done some environmental justice work on, but hadn't really engaged as deeply on. So one of the last projects I did was develop a green agenda for the Black community. And we were really shocked when we put out an invitation to the Black community nationally, and within 2 weeks' notice, we had over 300 people come to Washington, D.C., who represented organizations, academia, workforce programs, you name it. These were Black people from around the country who were interested in developing this legislative agenda, but also engaging their national leaders in this work. But because I was leading the work and got to meet all those people pretty firsthand, when people learned I was from Portland, everybody was like, oh my God, Portland is doing all these green things. Like they, I felt like they were saying, if I didn't use this word, but like Portland was kind of the green mecca. So they knew us for transportation, they knew us for sustainability, they saw our city as leading the world on these types of topics. But being Black, growing up here in Portland, I felt deeply kind of saddened by that because I felt like a lot of the people I was connected to here at home did not have connection into that side of Portland. They weren't a mainstream part of their narrative. They weren't benefiting from all the things that come with that part of who we are as a city. And so I moved home in 2011 and was really on a mission to help engage on that topic. So how do we as a city, with that type of narrative, being a majority white city, how can we better diversify the work? So lots of things happened, but I eventually landed at the Portland Bureau of Transportation, and I never had planned on having a career in the transportation world, but here I am. I've always been driven by civil rights work, legislative work, policy, activism, but transportation, outside of thinking about contracting and job creation, I hadn't really thought too deeply about this topic. And so actually, when I got the job offer, I called a friend in DC who was working at the US DOT at the time, the US Department of Transportation. I was like, I don't know if I want to take this job. I've never done transportation. I don't know what, I don't know why I would choose this as my focus. And she gave me a big old speech and just convinced me kind of all the opportunity there is to engage in the transportation world, but also to bring an equity lens to the work and really strengthen that. And so that has been my work. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like, but I guess I wanted to start with a question to you all on, what do you think the Portland Bureau of Transportation does and is responsible for? You're not going to grade it on it. But I'm always curious because there's kind of so many things happening that are transportation related. I just want to see, what do you think we do or should we do? As far as the services we provide and the things that we maintain.
The transportation wallet that's available to folks living or working in Northwest and Central East Side, I think.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. So
Okay,
thanks,
that's a pretty detailed example. Yes, we have transportation wallet programs in different parking districts, and hopefully you guys will get to learn a little bit more about those. But yeah, that's an example of an incentive program to try to get people to shift what modal options they're choosing in ways that we facilitate that. Any other ideas?
I think its main purpose in general, making sure that the working transportation systems work well and they're efficient, so improving the efficiency. But I also know that PBOT has really been focusing on inclusion. So, not just, improving the systems in the neighborhoods we're already fine, but also considering those that are really needing it. So the people who really need the access to public transportation and really focusing.
Another great answer. So efficiency in our system, generally maintaining the system, but also ensuring that the system meets the needs of everybody. What else? Bridges? Bridges, okay. Anything else? Got a slide, so I will. Scooters. Scooters, definitely. Well, I guess before I show you my slide, so this is our mission statement. The Portland Bureau of Transportation is the steward of the city's transportation system and a community partner in shaping a livable city. We plan, build, manage, and maintain an effective and safe transportation system that provides access and mobility. We keep Portland's moving. So who are we at PBOT? We're over 1,000 employees, and I think that number right now does not include seasonal employees that work with us through mostly the summer months to do construction. So I think we are either the largest or second largest bureau in the city. And we primarily are organized around 6 main work groups: so business services, development, permitting, and transit, maintenance operations, policy, planning and projects, engineering services, parking services. And then this is an image that kind of at a glance speaks to the assets that we own. So we own over $13 million worth of stuff. So someone mentioned bridges. We own a number of bridges, 152 ish at the moment. I think we actually just acquired another one the other day. But those bridges actually don't include the major bridges that you cross when you're crossing the river. So those are actually all owned by the county. But we own, bike towns, both bikes and bike stations. We have stairwells that we're maintaining. We have one dock on the river. We have a number of streets and roads, so over 169,000 roads. We own the streetcar, own and maintain the streetcar. We are responsible for all the safety lights, so over 300 of those, over 900 traffic signals, over 1,100 miles of lanes, corners, pay stations, elevators, crosswalks, etc. Oh, and the tram that goes up to OHSU, we own that. And the helipad, which is a smart park downtown on, I think, First and Davis. It's very random, but we own the helipad. So these are some of the services we provide at different times of the year. So, in the winter, we're part of the emergency planning around snow and ice. We do street cleaning, etc. In the spring, we're doing a lot of pothole repair, a lot of maintenance work, and street and sewer work with the Bureau of Planning and or the Bureau of Environmental Services. In the summer, that's our high construction season and a lot more maintenance, especially things like paving, sidewalk development, etc. And then in the fall, we're mostly dealing with leaves, but just trying to keep streets clean and safe while seasons are shifting. So here are some of the examples of the programs that we facilitate. Vision Zero is our main safety program. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Fixing Our Streets program is a 10-cent gas tax that helps to pay for a lot of our maintenance and safety projects around the region. Smart Parks, all the Smart Park garages are our programs. Parking Kitty, so if you drove today and you parked on the street or even in the PSU parking facilities, Parking Kitty is the app where you pay for your parking. Safe Routes to Schools is a way that we are supporting kids and families with getting to their schools. Sunday Parkways is the big one, you know, hundreds of thousands of people participating in that every year. And then Bike Town. I heard scooters mentioned. We don't own scooters, we regulate them similar to Uber and Lyft. So all of those are private companies and we regulate those through our city policies. So right now, we actually just launched recently a new 3-year strategic plan that's really helping us refine our priorities for the next few years. So safety is a huge issue for us. We actually, unfortunately, this year have the highest number of fatalities to date for this year. And so we are aggressively trying to make all the improvements, do all the education that we can to get those numbers down. But we're really working towards creating safer systems so that we're not just addressing one issue or one street at a time, but that we're creating really a safer transportation system overall. Moving people and goods. I'm sorry, this ends up being a little story, but you know, we got to get people moving. There's a lot of traffic. A lot of people are moving to Portland every day. And so the more people bring their cars with them and expect to travel in their cars, this clogs up our system. And when I moved here in 2011, when I first moved back, I lived off of 82nd and Foster, and I was commuting a lot on the freeways and then coming into downtown. And traffic was not great, but then I moved on to Martin Luther King Boulevard in Northeast Portland, and I lived there for a period of 3 years, and from the day that I moved in to the day that I moved out, the traffic just on that corridor alone felt like it had doubled. So traffic is definitely getting a lot worse in our region, and we're constantly finding different ways to manage that. And some of the speakers that you'll have throughout your course will come and talk about all these 3 issues. Then the last here is asset management. So, you know, if we own $13 billion worth of stuff, you know, it's expensive stuff that we're maintaining. And so we're constantly having to make choices and trying to figure out how to be financially sustainable with maintaining all of the things that we own. And then there are a number of other, you know, roads and streets and sidewalks that are in our transportation system, but that we don't technically own or maintain, but they have impact on our system. So we're constantly thinking about how to address those as well. So I want to talk about equity, and I just gave you a preview of my slide, but I guess I want to see what do you, so when it comes to the equity work that we have, I guess I'll just put it in the wrong order. So when you think about the history of our state and our region, what are some of the issues that come up to you when it comes to like equity and equity issues in our system? Actually, maybe we need to talk about what equity is first. Maybe that's why that's so let's talk about equity. I'll kind of define it as, or share out what the city defines as equity in a second, but this is an image that I love that really relates to our transportation world. You've probably seen different versions of like the fence and people stepping on the boxes. But you know, this to us is what we're trying to get to. And really, I also will say with the caveat that the goal is not to get everybody on a bike. Let's just put that out there. But we are trying to find solutions within our transportation system that meet the needs of our transportation system users. And that's what equity work is about. So we're saying that it's not about giving everyone the same thing and hoping that, you know, rising tides will lift all boats. That people will be able to get around if we give them the bike that we choose to give them. Is that we need to meet people where they are based on their ability, based on the safety concerns in their neighborhood, based on a number of different factors that can help them have a great experience in our transportation system. So what's exciting is, unlike a number, I actually don't know the real number, but I have not seen a lot of cities formally adopt racial equity strategies. So in the city of Portland, that happened in 2012 with the establishment of the Office of Equity and Human Rights. So it's one of the 26 bureaus across the city. And they are responsible for leading the racial equity work of the city. So when they were established, they also worked and had policy adopt these racial equity goals and strategies. And I'll share all these slides with you so you can see them in detail, but really the message is it's awesome that we do have a city that has made the step in this direction. Because it means that all the other bureaus in the city are responsible for both upholding the racial equity work and taking responsibility for actually doing the work. So what does that look like? Again, we have a bureau that's responsible for leading our work. Some of the current things that are happening, I just wanted to put on your radar is the city's been working with Policy Link to do some anti-displacement work, and so that's formally gotten funding at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. We're working with the Anti-Displacement PDX, which is a community coalition that did a lot of work, especially in the city's comprehensive plan, to adopt anti-displacement policies, but we're kind of just now getting into the place where we're launching and clarifying what that work means for us, who's responsible for what, and how we're going to do it. Since this 2020 is coming up, in addition to just wanting to get everyone counted, you know, all of our work and all of our funding sources rely heavily on complete counts happening. So our city is activating on that at the moment. We're on the steering committee of Portland United Against Hate. So that started as a city-sponsored community coalition that's really addressing the fact that in our political climate, not limited, you know, our national and probably international political climate, there is so much hate and violence and hate speech that people are experiencing that we in the transportation world, there are impacts on my ability to do my work, but we have found it important to join this type of work as well. And then lastly, there are a number of legal obligations that we have in our equity work, and that includes language access, so making sure that we have multilingual materials and interpretation services available to community members. We do civil rights, Title VI, and ADA Title II work, which is, those are federal anti-discrimination laws, and so we manage complaint processes for that. But I think the thing that's exciting and what I really want to spend a little bit of time talking about is the fact that we have been able to integrate our equity work into the core mission and values and strategic plan of the organization. So earlier I shared that we are moving these 3 core goals, but what we also have within our strategic plan is a transportation justice focus. So it means that we are organizationally in a place where we are asking ourselves 2 key questions as we move through our decision making. One, will the thing that we're deciding, will it advance our equity? Will it advance equity and address structural racism? And 2, will it reduce carbon emissions? So it's taken some time for us to organizationally get to the place where we stand up these types of questions in our decision making. But it's pretty exciting that we get to do that. And so that's really the core part of the work that I lead at the organization right now. We are on a path to develop the Transportation Justice Framework. We're internally standing up a Transportation Justice Steering Committee. And then we also will be engaging community partners in that work as well. So I think you're going to get it, I don't know if it's later today or in a future class. You guys are going to be kind of talking through a number of things that have happened over the course of history. But I want to see if there are any things that stand out to you. It's just like moments that you think have been important in the transportation world. Like, are there any issues or projects that you think have created inequities over time? Because that's the work that I think that you guys will be digging into over the course of this class. But I want to start with saying just kind of where are you guys in understanding? So I just kind of zipped through some of the equity stuff, but for your understanding of what's happened in our region, for your understanding of what the transportation system is and includes, like what have been the moments that stand out to you as moments or issues that have really created inequities in our system? Go ahead over here.
Well, I think of running I-5 through Albina and North Portland as one of the more obvious ones as far as the history.
Yeah, so big old freeway through a Black neighborhood has happened here in Portland, but also several other cities, and long-standing impacts on those communities.
I think going back to your equity slide, just creating a system that traditionally was car-based makes it difficult if you can't drive. If that's not an option for you, then
yeah. So how many people have lived in Portland for more than 20 years? How many people have lived here more than 20 years? Okay. So how many people have lived here less than 5 years? So old school Portlanders will tell you, you have to be able to get everywhere in a car in 15 minutes. So that is like 15, 20 minutes. You could get anywhere in the city of Portland in 15 or 20 minutes. That was because we were a lot smaller, so there were just less people, there were less cars, and it was an option that you kind of needed because things were still kind of spread out and you kind of had to get further to get to a lot of places. But, you know, people having different options, neighborhoods being built and created so that you don't have to travel long distances, or having this way more of the infrastructure that you need for those different mobility options definitely over time has impact
on. This is not really our region in Portland, but like just history overall when people of color couldn't really ride public transportation or had to like ride in the back of the bus. But then also it's kind of history, but not too much history in Portland. But 2 years ago when people get targeted riding public transportation, so safety could be an issue as well.
Definitely. So policy that, you know, regulated whether or not you could be on public transit or in a mode of transportation, and if you did participate in that, where you had to be. So Rosa Parks, what was she doing? That was a transportation issue. We think about that as just civil rights, but that was actually a transportation issue and civil rights. Safety, obviously, again, you know, we have been doing work with Portland Unite Against Hate because I'm just wanting to be present in that space, even though we don't all the way know what to do about it. So I didn't flag, but we're not TriMet, so we don't own the buses or the MAX. And so we're a partner agency with them, and the way that they do their work is probably not how PBOT would do it if we own the system, is what I will say. But, you know, when those events happen on public transit, for all the goals that we have for moving people, for getting people to use different modal options, et cetera, it's impacted by whether or not people feel safe in that mode of transportation. And so we have found, we have a number of community partnerships. We do a lot of focus groups, especially we've been doing more in communities of color. And folks are telling us, like, if they would prefer it, if they could afford it, and if they had a car, they would prefer to have their family travel in a car because they know their bodies would be safe. They know that they would be safe from interactions with people who don't want them, who resent them being in their neighborhoods, who resent them being in Portland in general. We have evidence of, you know, people of color who are wearing hijabs or traditional garments from their countries of origin or their cultures who are having to deal with, you know, just walking down the sidewalk and people screaming hate speech at them. And people who don't feel safe, you know, on scooters. Like we've had Black folks tell us, if people see us picking something up off the street, they're likely to call the police on us. And that's just like, we can't tell our kids to be doing that, even though that is how that mode of transportation is facilitated in the system. So there are a number of safety issues that come up for sure. hand over.
So I guess we're still talking about like history of transportation issues. I would say the Oregon Trail is probably the original transportation issue, and like this huge influx of colonizing people who came in and displaced.
Never thought about that. You know, a really good person who can talk to you about that will be our director, Chris Warner, because he came through the Oregon Trail. Because
He
came
was
from
the director.
Yeah.
His family is like, he grew up in Baker City,
Baker
so
City.
that's where people like travel the trail and ended up there. But also Laura Zahn, who's the city's tribal liaison, will be here as well.
She'll be here next week.
We've had a lot of good conversations just about even how some of the roads in Portland, Sandy, MLK, and some others, they actually were trails that Native people used and that we then paved and created streets on. So there are a lot of implications both on how people migrated here, but also how the transportation system has absorbed the way that original people got around and created it as part of our mainstream system as well.
Transportation issue, I would actually say buses and how they're often designed for two reasons. One, payment is expected upfront, resulting in a line, resulting in a misuse of people's time when compared to Max and streetcar and other transit devices. The other would be an inequity that single moms or dads, whether full-time or just in that moment, face with kids. If you fold up your stroller, it's extremely difficult once you have a second kid to ride the bus in Portland or anywhere in the U.S.
And I would add to that also just a person's ability and their personal mobility needs. So in addition to a stroller, they may have a walker, they may have a cane, they may have a visual impairment, they may have anything. Like there are so many different circumstances that people have in their lives and ways that our system and our transit options especially do or do not serve them well. Something we're constantly thinking about. I'm gonna go here, here, and then I'll move on.
Something I've been seeing a lot is public transit fees going up while gas taxes, except for Portland, somehow raised the gas tax here. Nationally, it hasn't gone up in decades. But we expect, public transit and the fares to be raised almost annually or pretty frequently.
The transportation cost for a household is actually the second highest, usually line item in a household budget. So first is whatever your housing situation is. Second is usually transportation. So if you own a car, that's maybe a car payment, insurance, et cetera. If you're taking public transportation, our system is not that cheap. I remember when it was a lot cheaper, but also when there was a Fairless Square, and that was helping people just get around in the central city. And even buying, bus fare or bus passes for multiple people in your household. So the way that we are paying for our system through gas tax, et cetera, now are not the best funding mechanisms that we could be using, but it's a reality of what's happening.
On a similar note, the hierarchy of criminalization of if you don't pay your fare in that environment, the repercussions of that versus repercussions of parking and and not paying the meter is very disproportionate. Slap on the hand versus things like that. So I think that is not in line.
Yeah, so there are different types of enforcement that are happening in transit. There's enforcement on public transportation, on the transit system, and the reasons why they do it can be are definitely problematic, and the way they do it is problematic. The statistics on who's most impacted is problematic. But there are other types of enforcement that we're kind of digging in on as well. So traffic fines, for example, how we're stopping people. What is the opportunity for police enforcement and bias and how they're disproportionately pulling people over? What are they finding and how are they citing people when they are pulled over for one offense, but then they cite them for everything else that comes up? So, and then the economic impacts of those fines. So, if there aren't options where you can opt out, it's fine. If you can go to a class, if you have time to go to the class, and fines doubling if you don't have the ability to go to the courthouse. Like there's all types of things that happen both with enforcement and then.
I was gonna say like sexual harassment on transit too, like not having proper lighting, and a lot of people that don't take the tram past a certain time, and then like having place on the tram, but obviously isn't like the solution because it makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable too. But like, it definitely sucks.
Yeah, so another safety issue.
The issues that impact shift workers and people whose commutes are at night, I think it's another safety issue and maybe ties into some of the sexual harassment. But I mean, I noticed that, you know, you're not gonna want to bike on Springwater Corridor at night, but there's also if you don't have a bike, if you don't have a car, and there just aren't as many Maxes and buses coming, how are you going to make it to your job?
Definitely. Yeah, so there's a lot of transportation talk that you'll probably hear in the next 10 weeks that is centered around census data, which usually means that we're talking about vehicle miles traveled, and all of that is really centered around commutes. But that mostly is your 9 to 5 traditional hours, and so I don't believe that accounts for things. And we don't really talk about like swing shift and folks that work kind of non-traditional shifts and the impacts or the experiences that they have in our transportation system, the different types of safety needs when it's darker at night, when you're coming from a neighborhood that's not as well lit. But also, what are your options if the bus doesn't run all night and you're standing at the bus stop or the next stop for longer because it doesn't come as frequently? So there are a number of implications on that as well. So I think we've kind of maybe tackled the second question already, but is there anything else when it comes to just some of the biggest equity concerns that you have, and maybe just some other things that you want to hear about while you guys move through this class? Anyway.
Maybe the relationship of the transportation system to affordable housing and to the land use component of that.
Definitely. So land use issues in relationship to affordable housing.
Congestion pricing and how it might impact some populations more than others.
So congestion pricing, do you want to define that for us? So I can...
Sure. It's a form of transportation demand management. A form of managing the flow of vehicles on, say, freeway, and how many people can get on and off of it. There's also induced. Sorry, I actually don't.
You're using all the transportation words. Yeah, I'm just giving you a translation for you. So usually, I mentioned earlier, you know, we're always managing for congestion. So the way that you do that is through transportation demand management, which hopefully some of our PBOS folks will come in and talk about. And so congestion pricing is something that's being discussed internationally. It's starting to be deployed. If you think about tolling on freeways, especially on the East Coast, or if you, I think, go to San Francisco and some other places, freeway tolling is kind of the thing you think about. But what we're actually in a dialogue now around how to build in more congestion pricing strategies. So basically pricing the drivers so that they are paying for the system that they're using, but also as a way to discourage people from driving. But then we have to think about all the equity issues that come with that. So who's going to be impacted by those shifts, and then how do we mitigate for the inequities that may come? We're actually recruiting for a congestion pricing public advisory body. Send around the announcement for that. But if you wanted to dig in on that policy project, we have a current opportunity. Do you have something back here?
Well, if we're talking about equity concerns today, we could probably start with where we started the last one and then do I-5 Rose Quarter expansion.
I-5 Rose Quarter expansion.
That is adding more vehicle lanes and how we can rationalize trying to reduce carbon emissions and vehicle miles traveled while expanding the lanes, especially running those diesel pipes right next to Harriet Tubman. And in my own world for TriMet today, as we get more money from the last legislative package, it's interesting to see more expansion. Say this, it's continuing how TriMet serves the middle class commuters that are going from inner neighborhoods to downtown. When really those that need transit are spread throughout the entirety of Portland, and they need as much bus service on 168th as they do on 68th.
So those are two great examples of transportation projects and issues that have regional impacts that PBOT is also not responsible for. We don't own I-5, we don't own freeways, but they come through our city. And so we have a partnership with ODOT on the I-5 Rose Corridor project. It's very politically controversial. I think you guys will dig in on it one of these past dates. But it's an example of like another agency doing something in our city and us wanting to make it, if it's going to happen, make it the best thing possible. If the state legislature has made the move to invest into the project, and we have to show up and make it kind of the best thing for our city. So our focus on that project really is the local, the kind of local street connections that are possible on top of the freeway. And we're not in the details on the freeway stuff quite as much, but I won't get into that. But TriMet, also another example. So bus service, especially out in East Portland, we want to see it happen. We have a plan. We have a series of improvements that we're making on roads, especially major roads with major transit service. That's called enhanced transit corridors, where we are trying to do our part to make sure that communities can access all the transit stops and all the make sure that buses can drive and get where they need to go, and that the MACs, et cetera, are interacting with our system appropriately and efficiently. But we aren't the owners of the system, and so we do our part. We try to make our investments so that they can do their job better.
It's kind of just echoing what you mentioned, kind of about how Portland in particular is very anti-car, and that in itself can be a equity issue due to people that may need a car to get around. But I understand, like Portland, I do all types of transportation approaches, but Portland in particular, and what the future is very anti-car. So I think that's like the issue that's may happen in the future, or is happening.
Well, funny story, when I got hired at PBOT, before I started the job, I called the guy that hired me and I said, am I allowed to drive my car? Like, is that like a no-no for PBOT employees? Because I think it's also partially a perception. It's a perception that like nobody's driving, but then we're all sitting in traffic, so like but also, especially affordable housing was brought up earlier. You know, as the city gets more expensive to live in, as more people are moving here, as there's more development happening, you know, and folks are having to live further and further out, and then transit is not able to get them where they need to go, or the transit system is either so clogged up or so slow that it takes a really long time to take the bus or the MAX. You know, cars still is a reality for folks. Or again, if you have a family of 5 and you have to consider, do you pay for the car or do you pay for a bus pass for all those family members? It comes with a lot of things. We, again, have done focus groups. We did some focus groups at Self Enhancement Inc. that were actually around scooters, and we were trying to see how Black community felt about e-scooters coming into our transportation system. And a lot of the folks in the space were living in Fairview and Troutdale, like beyond Gresham at this point. And so they were saying, like, scooters seem fun and my kids want to ride them, but it's expensive, and B, you know, we're still coming into central north and northeast Portland to be served, to see our families, to be with our community. And so scooters are an option, biking is an option, MAX or bus from out there is usually not an option. So they were still relying on cars.
I think for me, being a teacher, you know, the amount of traffic violence that kills children, and also pollution, the amount of children that have asthma because of, you know, pollution caused by cars, and, you know.
Yeah, well, our friend at the county over here, is doing some great work around addressing chronic disease in the Black community. So Multnomah County got a REACH grant from the Center for Disease Control because, and it's one of how many cities?
132.
So there are 32 cities around the country that got similar grants, but for Portland to have such a small Black population, federally they are recognizing that the preventable diseases are happening so frequently here that they needed to intervene and provide funding for the county to address that. And a lot of that is close to freeways. A lot of that is close to sites that have ports and all those things that have those emissions coming at higher rates, but also impacting people's health. And I think our Bureau has not done a great job of making the linkage in that way, but it's definitely on our work plan to better understand the issue and how do we better mitigate it. So it is getting people out of their cars, but it is also how the cities are designed, how land use scenarios are happening, et cetera, that contribute to the problem as well.
It's a little bit of an echo. I guess part of it is access and availability, and then consistency. So that's specifically buses and everything. This has already been said. People living further out either can't or are going to have to choose to get a car to get to work or whatever. And I live in Northwest. I pay like nothing for transportation. It's just such a minor part of my budget. That's kind of messed up and unfair. Like I make a decent salary. Like it's too easy for me. I'm benefiting way too much from the system than other people. But I think the other part I was thinking with this broad idea of a large system also is quality, and specifically with bike lanes. We just don't really have protected bike lanes, and I've spoken with and also heard today with many people who they just don't feel safe, so they don't ride a bike, whether it's because there's not protection, whether it's because there's not lighting, whether it's because there are too many cars on the road. So I don't feel like we can improve in giving people more transit options that are safe, which is you guys are working on and doing a great job, but we can keep
So I guess my biggest equity concern for transportation today is probably the sort of perception that we can engineer our way out of the issue, with huge infrastructure projects, which in my opinion are just really expensive. They take too long to build, and they're not going to have as much of an impact as we want, because this thing is not just about solving traffic. It's about combating climate change. We only have so much time to mitigate the worst impacts of it. And if we don't implement strategies that are can be quickly turned out, it's not going to be enough.
Are they never going to be enough? For real, but I hear you. I don't think it's been announced yet.
Wait a minute, we're live.
The city and the mayor, there are a number of cities around the world that are declaring climate emergencies and using it as an opportunity to really accelerate to do policy work that can shift the dilemma a lot faster, or shift the solution sets forward a lot faster. And so that's a part of some of the things that we have. Maybe by the end of this class, you guys will get to hear about that a little bit more.
By the end of this class, you can solve that problem.
Yes. So I know I'm sharing a lot of examples of all the things that PBOT is doing. We are not doing everything well. It's never enough. We can never do all the things to address all the history and to support people in the ways that they truly need it, and not the ways that we as a government agency are still comfortable in doing it for them. But I'm trying to provide examples for you also to just get you thinking about what government can be doing and what we should be doing more. So I hope that as you move through this class, you can think about, these issues and these dilemmas and really try to tease out of your presenters, what is happening? Are you doing enough? What would you do if you had unlimited resources? Like, how do we really truly solve these problems? Because that's what we're really on a path to do. We can't do it all. We have a finite amount of resources, but we are trying to be a little bit more innovative and responsive, especially because we know that there have been so many things that we have done over time that have created more problems for people that are experiencing more disparate impacts that are preventable, that we can be solving for, that we can think about upfront, design for, educate for, program for. So I don't want this to seem like, oh, we're doing everything great, but I just want to send the signal that we are working to address some of these problems, and we hope that as you move through this work and as you're doing your class projects, et cetera, that you can also help to elevate some of the answers and some of the things that we can continue to send. We didn't talk a whole lot, or I didn't hear a whole lot coming forward about disability access, and I kind of anticipated that because this is probably one of the populations that gets the least amount of attention. But it was actually going through a budget exercise last year that I realized, wow, PBOT is doing a lot to support disability access needs. And so these are some examples. The interesting thing is that a few of these actually, well, two of these in particular, we end up having to do because community came forward and said, for other, you're creating programming and you're doing work, but you're not working towards increasing disability access. And so those two are the creek settlements. So that is accessible curb ramps. A national organization actually threatened to sue us. And so now we're required to build 1,500 accessible ramps every year. So that's an example of like, we thought we were doing it, or we thought we were doing it fast enough. They checked us on that, and now we are having to accelerate our ability to do that, which is a huge investment, but also a really amazing thing. The other one I want to flag is Adaptive Bike Town. So we have our Orange Bike Town program, but the disability community came forward and said, we can't ride those bikes. And so we actually have a seasonal Adaptive Bike Town program that's available with different bike types for that community to ride and just feel like they have mobility options as well. The other one I wanted to talk a little bit more, sorry, I'll update these graphics. This is our Vision Zero High Crash Corridor Network. So we have 30 streets across the city that are part of our high crash network. And then there are intersections as well where we have data that just elevates for us that these are the most dangerous places in Portland. Do you have any observations about this map? So here's the river, southwest, east side, far east side. Do you have any observations around what this map represents?
It seems to impact outer East Portland the most.
Definitely outer East Portland. When you're up close, you can see that outer East Portland is where most of the most dangerous intersections are, especially. And then even if the streets are in East Portland, only a few of them are north-south. So all of the streets that are carrying people from one side of the city into the central city are mostly high crash. So the Vision Zero program is an international campaign to end deaths in our streets. As I mentioned earlier, unfortunately this year we've had the highest number of fatalities on Portland streets that we've had in a really long time, and especially since we launched our own city's Vision Zero program. So this is a huge part of what drives our investments. So when we talk about capital projects and other big moves that we're trying to make, it's often that we're trying to solve for this problem. It's that we're trying to make sure that these streets are safer. Lighting is a huge issue, especially in East Portland. I was driving out there like a year or so ago. Now that I'm in transportation world, I'm always like observing all the transportation stuff. I was like, why are there only lights on one side of the street? And it turns out that a lot of those East Portland high crash streets only have lighting on one side, and that's part of what contributes to the safety concerns. So that's a huge priority for us now to try to ensure that we can get more lighting on the other side of those streets to help address those issues. Out there, you also see a lot of roadway redesigns happening because there are a number of cases where there are so many lanes that there aren't enough pedestrian crossing areas, so folks are just darting across the street. So in 2017, that winter, unfortunately, there were, I think, 3 fatalities, specifically with Asian American elders on the outer division and in close proximity to that. And it was really hard. It was also hard that it hit one specific community, one specific population. But one of the things that we learned as we were out in community, doing more education campaigns with Apano and some other networks, is that folks were coming from cultures where the street activity and the street atmosphere was just different. And so they hadn't really learned how to interact with those types of corridors because those weren't the places that they were coming from. So an example of where, we're doing a lot of infrastructure, but we're also trying to get out there and educate community a little bit more about why it's important to try to make it to the crosswalk. Why do you want to be at the intersection to cross? What's the safest way to cross? What are the laws for pedestrians? And making that information accessible in multiple languages, training it in different styles, having different community partnerships. So when it comes to, you're good. So when it comes to the types of work areas that I'm focused on, what's hard is I'm technically a team of 2, so it's myself as the manager and I have a coordinator, and we serve a bureau of 1,000 people doing all of this type of work. And so it's hardest because I have to become an expert in all the things in order to be able to support all of our teams on their different work areas. But this is kind of how my work is organized on my work plan this year. So again, we're really focused on the alignment with our strategic plan. It's great that we are integrated into our work in that way. It means that I'm getting to be involved and intervene in budget decisions, that for the 3 categories, asset management, safety, and mobility, that I'm a part of the dialogues that they're having around congestion pricing, around how we're prioritizing which assets we're going to maintain with our limited funds, et cetera. And I'm helping them to apply. We'll be building out a transportation justice lens for that work, and I'll be helping them to implement that in that work. We're trying to really define what is an equitable transportation system. Like, we've never grappled with that question. What would it mean for everyone to be served in the way that they need to be served in the system? And how do we make investments to support that? Strengthen community partnerships. Again, you can't build all the infrastructure and not talk to people, not know what their experience is in the system, not know what they need, and not engage with them and have them be a part of the leadership that both informs our decisions and our investments, but also out in community, sharing messages and engaging with community partners. Workforce development and special recruitment efforts. So 1,000 people in our workforce, not as diverse as we need it to be, but with some interventions, we now have cohorts of staff coming in that have been more diverse than ever. And this last year, we did a big recruitment for utility workers at our maintenance operations division. Maintenance operations is about half of our organization. And so it was awesome that we had kind of the most diverse cohort coming in at one time. We're also in the process of hiring our parking enforcement officers. Which is already a really diverse team, but I heard they got over 200 applications for 20-something positions, and they had the most diverse applicant pool that they've ever had. And so as we're building community partnerships and making these other moves, and we're kind of focused on building trust in community, we're also able to recruit into our workforce and expand opportunity for people to have more jobs and get into the transportation world. We're really trying to focus on data. Data in equity world in general is really challenging. It's hard to measure your success on equity if you don't start from a place on knowing how to measure equity stuff. Like, how do you measure racism and interactions that people have with other people in the transportation system? We don't know. So we're trying to move through a conversation now to really figure out how do we get clarity on what data we're trying to focus on, what indicators support the work that we want to do, and then how do we move towards the outcomes that we want to have.
Just curious if you could share maybe some examples of, some of the data that you guys are trying to collect, or some of the things that are important from those conversations.
Data, I'm moving into being more deeply engaged on data, but an example that's coming up right now is in the use of data. So as data is privatized, as there's facial recognition technology, et cetera, you'll hear about smart cities, and that technology has the ability to basically collect personal data and information. And everything that we do, Facebook, social media, our phones, like it's all collecting data. But there are huge conversations around the privacy of that data, the ability to personalize it versus keep it anonymous, and then how do you use the data in a way that's ethical and responsible. Because I would love to have data so I can know, like, how do Black people move through the city, but I can't assume that the way that companies have set it up now is the most ethical way to be informed about that. So we start with community conversations now, but we're trying to figure out, like, if there was an easy way to pull data, how do we do that? What's the best way to do that? But the other things for data is, like, we have a PBOT equity matrix, which includes, racial data, language data, and income data. But we also overlay that with our High Crash network and our the city's affordable housing investment strategies and some other data sets, so that we have a more intersectional approach on how we're trying to solve for the problems in our system.
I was just, when you were saying, like, like we've had like the most diverse pool of applicants, what do you mean by diversity? Is it the age difference, gender? Is it only race, or does it include like nationalities, the country of origin stuff?
Yeah, so the city is focused on leading with race, because I think we have determined that is where we have the biggest challenge and the biggest historical disparities. And so we lead with race data. Age, gender, other things. The Office of Equity and Human Rights actually has a workforce demographics dashboard, which is really interesting if you ever want to see, like, who works at the city of Portland. You can manipulate the data by both the bureau to know, like, what it looks like by industry, but also by race, ethnicity groups, gender, manager level versus other classes of folks in the city. But our recruitment efforts specifically have been focused on diversifying by race. In our maintenance division specifically, there also is a focus on gender, because there has been a huge gender imbalance there as well. But we have women's leadership there right now, so we're going for it. Quickly through the others, so contracting is a huge one for us. So we have over 200 capital projects in the pipeline right now. That means we're deploying lots of things around the city. We can't deliver all of that in-house, so we do a lot of contracting. There are citywide aspirational goals around utilizing disadvantaged minority women and emerging small businesses. So we currently have an equity contracts coordinator that is focused on ensuring that we're both meeting and exceeding our goals, and that we're identifying new tools and solutions for us to solve for some of the problems that come up for these contractors. So we're doing a lot of that work. Enhanced language access. So we have legal requirements around how accessible our materials and information is supposed to be, but we're not doing a super great job at that. So we have some budget invested into that, and we'll be doing a big push on that work this year. But it's so interesting, some example, like a random example of how communities probably has wanted to engage with us over time, but we've just like recently been able to support it, is we have a Leaf Day program where we go around the city, or not the whole city, but in certain the parts of town that have the highest density of tree canopy. We pick up those leaves and we bring them to a composting facility. And then a couple times a year, we have to give away the compost so people can come and buy the compost, because we need to make space for next leaves. And then this last year, it was actually the Chinese community that was like the population that came forward the most to collect it. And we weren't really sure how, but then in the next, I guess that was last year, so this year, we went to the Chinese Times and we started doing more advertising. Because we said, hey, this population is interested, let's support and make sure they have all the information available and accessible. We've also done some really interesting safety and education events using translators and interpreters on site. For languages, so there are 10 primary city languages, but we've also been trying to reach populations that are not included in those 10, and so we've had some really interesting engagement. And then I guess the last is performance measures. It's partially tied to data, but when it comes to budgeting in government, but also budgeting for equity, you have to be, again, really specific about the data that informs why you're investing and also how you're going to measure your success. So we're trying to focus on that more. So.
For your enhanced language access?
Sorry, say that again?
For your enhanced language access?
Yeah.
So when this class is put on YouTube, will it be closed captioned?
If it's on the PBOT YouTube, yes.
Yeah, there's, it's not, someone's not like captioning it live, but there's like an automatic captioning system.
Oh yeah, I know when we don't have an interpreter up front or anybody's doing right now, but once it gets posted and it's historical or reference material, then it's closed captioned through the YouTube channel.
Yeah, so anytime the city or government posts any videos, they should have closed captioning, and if they don't, it's called out. So, we don't have time to kind of talk about, I talked about racial equity, the city's commitments, the fact that I'm doing work kind of under the name of equity. But what I also introduced is that we're trying to also talk about transportation justice, which to me is a stronger approach to addressing inequities. So there are some working definitions coming from other organizations around what is equity in mobility, what is equity in transportation justice. So I will leave these with you guys. So this is, compliance with federal law, the untokening as a body of work that has grown. They actually have a conference in Durham, North Carolina this weekend. We sent some folks out there. But it's folks that are focused on mobility justice, that are like people in the transportation world, probably working for government agencies, but who are trying to get more aggressive with how they are implementing equity work. So they've created their own space to talk about that. And then the Association of City Transportation Officials also has this working definition of equitable transportation. So I think as you guys move through your work, I'll leave these with you guys, but I would encourage you to think about what was actually those original 2 questions that I thought of, that I did from our strategic plan work. And I would encourage you, especially if PBOT staff comes forward and they're talking to you about things, feel free to ask these questions. How does this thing in transportation advance equity? How does it address structural racism? And then how is it also reducing carbon emissions? Those are the questions that we're starting with our transportation work. We, in the next couple of weeks, will be launching our Transportation Justice Steering Committee that will be working towards a more formal framework that we'll have to help guide our decision making. But as you guys respond to these questions in the next 10 weeks, I would encourage you to share notes back with us and we can build that into our internal process as well. I think that is what I was going to share, just so you can know what is going on in Portland. I'll leave my information here as well if you ever want to reach out. And I will be available through the course of your time in this class if you guys want to request any information or have access to maps or graphics or more details about anything that I shared here. And otherwise, I look forward to hearing how you guys move through these conversations.
We have 5 minutes. It's raining. We have 5 minutes before class ends, but I really want you, I don't think we'll have time today because I do want to close up the class, but you have the privilege wheel. And I use this for a couple of my other classes, and I think it's a good exercise for you to take home and bring back next week. and do it in color, do it in however makes sense for you, and read it. It's interesting because what I did in my last class was had a handful of students do this, and we put the privilege wheel all across the board on the wall, and it really interesting to see where people came from. So do it as a homework exercise, do it in color, do it in pen, however you want, but my intent is I'll bring some tape and we'll put it up in the wall just to see, and it'll be anonymous, so you don't have to put your name on there. But it'll give you an idea of who your classmates are and where you are, where you navigate in the world. And I think there's like different types of privilege exercises where you step forward and back, and that becomes like more, I've never done that before, but you might have, and I think that becomes, this is just kind of nice because it gives you a more graphical interpretation of where you are, and you do it in your private setting, and then you'll post it on the wall. So next week, I'm bringing here my grade school friend. This is how my world works. It's really interesting. So Laura John, which is our tribal liaison director, I think she's got a new position at the city. She and I went to grade school together. Way back when we grew up in the hood here in Northeast Portland. And Laura's one of these girls in school you don't want to mess with. But she's our tribal liaison for the city of Portland, and I had invited her to come to the class to talk about her work in the city, her work within the bureaus, and some of the transportation challenges that she's had to do, and also like just the work within communities, indigenous communities, and then how she's bridging those gaps with her initiatives within the city. So it'll be an interesting conversation. It may be the very first time we've got an indigenous person to come talk about tribal communities, so it's gonna be pretty cool. So looking forward to next week, especially because I haven't really heard Laura speak in a long time, and she's a good friend of mine. So do you guys have any questions at this point? Yes.
Can I ask a couple of quick questions just about the logistics of how the class
Yeah.
runs? And also maybe give space to anyone who needs to leave, if they need to do that. That might, before I start asking questions, like some folks might have to burst out the door.
Oh, you mean in terms of timing?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Should we expect each class to sort of look like this where we're sitting and listening to the guest speaker, or is there like group work? Is there reading? I should also say it's been a while since I've been in a classroom setting. Like it would be helpful to know, like, is it going to look like this every week? Like what is the next
Yeah,
one?
this is the first week, so it's different. There's a lot of introductions and kind of the transition to the last round of the course until now. I do anticipate group work and participation, and I think that just is how we learn. So we will do that, incorporate that towards the latter part of class. A lot of it's timing also because we're only here for 2 hours, and there's a lot of information that I also want you to have. Like this was actually supposed to be a group project work but oh my God, like homework.
Is there any reading or homework?
Oh, you know what? There is another homework.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's good. And Steve Daughter has been a historian. I don't know his title, but he's always come back to speak to this class on the history of transportation. And because I don't have direct connections to him, I did not invite him back. But if you go onto the website where you register for class, there is a video of his course that he spoke to the class that talks about the history of transportation. So if you can view that, I think it may just be 45 minutes to an hour.
That's the talk you gave last year?
That's the talk he gave last year. So I think what I want you to do is go home between now and next class is to watch that, kind of digest it, but also come with questions, because what you're going to hear from Laura is going to be what you would have listened from Steve.
So I just want to mention that the videos right now from last year are being different.
So there's
there's
a link, sorry. So there's a specific link. It says the history of transportation by Steve Daughter. It was not from last year. It was from maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It was an annual history lesson that he gave with slides. I can't verify the quality of it because it was before we were using PSU as a facility, but there is a link. So where you did register, scroll down to the very, very, very bottom, and there should be a link on there. We can verify, and we'll verify, and if it's not there, we'll email everybody. But otherwise, onus is on everybody to go to the bottom of the main page where you've signed up, and there's a link, This is history and transportation class.
Got it.
Yeah.
Is the project something we do individually, or is that a group work thing? The big project we
Always
deliver.
been individual projects. I had thought about it making a group project, but because everybody has different lives here and nobody's on the same stream of work, so I think it's really difficult unless you want to do it as a group project. But it's always been individual. I might change it next year to make it more of a holistic group project. But think about what kind of projects you want to work on. If you do want to team up with another person, I'm more than happy to make that happen.
Will
So
there be a session specifically about what the project is, the goals of it?
you know what, we're going to do that next week because we'll have more time because next week we'll just have me and Laura.
Okay.
Yeah, it's at the very bottom. It says Portland's transportation history. I just verified, so you're all good. Just scroll to the very, very, very bottom.
There's a Google Drive that we're going to be creating. Sarah's going to help me create it, and you're all invited to that. So I'll post presentations. You'll have them. I'll post my syllabus as well as my presentation and information where we could communicate.
Got it. One last thing.
Yes.
I think the loud boy left, but do you prefer we put our hands up when we have something to say, or do we want to ask a question?
Yeah, hands will be nice.
Yeah, okay,
Hands will be nice.
great.
So
Thanks for
look-
answering my question.
Yeah, no, good. So it looks like we have about 24 students. I think he has left, I don't know. But I did say that I might take people off of the waiting list to come to join the class because I'm still keeping at 30.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, in your slides, you had some recommended reading that is not in this list. Because you had Jane Jacobs and a couple other things, so I wondered.
Yeah, I am. If it's not on the list, I'll bring it back up. I'll put it on the Google Drive. It's just fun reading. It's recommended, it's not really hard.
That's gonna be over at 5, so from 5 to 6:30. Okay, let's get, okay.
Hi, are you coming to the mixer tomorrow? What's the date tomorrow?
IPT?
Yeah, oh no, it's a student, faculty, but you only have one credit left, so. Yes, it is. That's why I will look at it and see if I'll add you on your Google Calendar.
There was an email as well, it's a staff thing.
I'm interested, I think that's good. Okay.
We have pizza from Pizzicato. Fancy.
So fancy. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Yeah, I think
Yeah, I was trying to.
Catherine was like, we haven't met and done the whole budget thing, and Hal was like, we'll figure it out later. I think Hal's gonna pay